Welcome and thank you for joining us for the very first Leading Out Loud live event. When I launched this podcast, the goal was simple: create honest conversations about leadership. Over the past few months, we've had incredible guests share their experiences, lessons learned, and moments that shaped them as leaders. One theme has consistently emerged: leadership isn't a solo sport. That's exactly why I'm so excited about today's panel. We have an incredible group of leaders representing different backgrounds, disciplines, and perspectives. Together, they're going to help us explore what it really looks like to lead across functions and across organizations.
All right. Well, welcome and thank you for joining us for the very first Leading Out Loud live event. When I launched this podcast, the goal was pretty simple. I wanted to create honest conversations about leadership. And over the past few months, we've had some incredible guests share their experiences, lessons learned, mistakes made, and moments that shaped them as leaders. And one theme has consistently emerged, and that really is that leadership is not a solo sport. It does require collaboration, courage, accountability, and really that willingness to learn from people who think differently than we do. And that's exactly why I'm so excited about today's panel. We have an incredible group of leaders representing different backgrounds, disciplines, and perspectives. So first and foremost, I do want to thank and welcome Dr. Shandell Maxwell, Amanda Dunaway, Evie Staples, Sandra Beckett, and last but not least, Alistair Gamble. And together, they're going to help us explore what it really looks like to lead across functions, across teams, and across organizations in a world where none of us succeed in silos. Now, this is meant to be a conversation, not a presentation, so I do encourage you to participate, ask questions, engage with our panelists, and I do want to thank all of the attendees for spending a small part of your day with us. So let's get started. I thought that we could warm up our attendees and our panelists with a few fun rapid fire questions. And so what I mean by that is it really is kind of what pops to mind, keyword or phrase when you hear these questions. So to start, and anybody can grab it from the panel, what is one leadership phrase that you never want to hear again?
My door is always open. Almost never true in practice.
Fair. Okay. Anybody else?
Do more with less. Yes. I hope we move past that soon.
Okay. Mine is circle back. And the funny thing is I use it and I hate it. It's like, just address it. Address it now. Like, let's not circle back. Right.
The one that was in my brain, and I was like, I'm not gonna say because I feel like it's the oldest corporate phrase ever. Like, put a pin in it and circle back are the two that seem like have been around forever.
Yeah.
That it's like, again, why are we putting a pin in it? Can we solve it now? Because I don't want another meeting and I definitely don't want another email.
Yes. We don't want to drag it out for another 12 months, but we probably will if we circle back. Okay. In your experience, again, to the panel, what is the fastest way for a leader to lose credibility?
Are these still the rapid fun questions?
Yeah. Yeah. It's supposed to be fun. Yes, that's right. Thank you. I mean, I'm having fun.
I was going to answer that very seriously. Rapid fun questions.
I mean, this is low hanging fruit, but I mean, if you lie, if you either give misinformation, particularly as it relates to the employees, the terms and conditions of their employment, in the legal world, we sort of have a hierarchy of when you screw up. If you screw up on somebody's pay or benefits, that's a big no-no, right? If you get the wrong date for pizza day, obviously that's lower on the lower on it. But to always maintain your credibility, and that obviously means that you have to be, I think, proactive about it. But in terms of knowing what you're going to say and what you can commit to, and thinking about it, don't be glib. But if you, in fact, give bad information that causes somebody a reasonable harm, I think you have to own it. Otherwise, you're going to lose that credibility, and people won't believe you, and that goes real fast.
Yeah. Yeah. I see a couple comments too. Missy, I was thinking not following through.
Yeah.
I think in my experience, it's losing the trust, right? It's saying something. And even if they aren't ill-intended when the leader says it, but they think like it's kind of a false promise, but like it's a soft no. I think you just have to be transparent and you have to follow through. Like your word is gold. And to the employee, they're hanging on to that, right? And so the second you don't follow through, now they don't trust you to some degree.
Say if you aren't listening. So a lot of times you have to make a rapid decision, you have to pivot, you have to do something that you weren't expecting to do as a leader. You have to make a call. You were hoping for the best. You're hoping for a pizza party. All we can afford is salad today, right? Like, but if I listen on a regular basis, I've built up a bank of trust such that if a thing from left field comes in, if I've earned that trust, then I can spend on that bank of trust and explain on the back end why that changed because I've built a track record of listening. I think when you can hear your organization, you can make decisions that your organization trusts. If you're not listening to your organization, then you're making these decisions from a place that feels out of touch, that feels like, oh, you don't know what it's like to have my day-to-day experience. And then there's that disconnect that happens between leaders and teams. So I think regular listening sessions, just to keep it up as a healthy activity, allows that connection to happen, that trust, so that I'm trusting you to guide me to this direction because I know you'll hear me if something goes wrong here and I say it, right? So I don't think any of us can be perfect, but listening helps us to try to do our best by folks.
Yeah, and to that point, Evie, I think if you have that kind of regular open communication, even if it's not more than a couple minutes every day, right? Because we're all busy and you don't want to have your manager standing over, at least I don't, standing over me all day, but it also allows you to detect if there's something wrong. It's something wrong perhaps with your relationship with the management, or just in general, there might be something up with their life that you might need. And I'm not saying we have to go in and fix their personal problems, but to know they're carrying an extra load or something that can be helpful to say, look, I'll take a little extra today or whatever it is that you need, but you have that more human, more immediate contact. And I think that also builds trust.
Yeah. And Missy talked about giving realistic feedback also, no lip service from a leader, right?
Yes.
I'd like to jump in here and say, authenticity. Are you the same person in the workplace as you are at the grocery store if we run into each other? Right? When there is that inconsistency that can really create distrust. But yeah,
I agree. And I do think we've talked about before, everyone wears different hats. So, Shandell, you and I know each other very well from over a decade. What we may look like to each other at a party is a little different than the boardroom, but there is still that authentic core, right, that comes through. You're just wearing a different hat. And I think what leaders don't realize, people pick up on that. As much as they think they may appear polished or what have you, you get that vibe where you're like, I don't think this is who this person actually is. And that creates distrust as well, right? Okay, you guys want one more fun question? Okay.
Sure.
Because you're having a great time, I can tell. Okay. Let's see. Oh, okay, here. What is one interview question that tells you a lot about a candidate, in your opinion?
One that they might ask us or one that we would ask them that tells us everything we need to know?
I think that you would ask them that would give you a good read on who's sitting in front of you.
it's that superpower question, right? What's your superpower? If you had a superpower, what would it be? Because dependent on their response, that gives you a peek into their personality, that alter ego, if you will. Yeah.
Whenever I particularly want to know if somebody's making somewhat of a career choice, right? They're moving from a law firm, for example, to in-house, something like that. If there's some kind of significant change, or even if there's not, just what is it that precipitated, this change? What is it that you are excited about getting in this job? Really to test again that authenticity of, is this just another gig? Or I think oftentimes if they've thought about it, that you'll get a very nice answer. And in my experience, it give you a good sense for whether or not that'd be a good fit.
Mm-hmm.
In the chat, Christopher talked about you're deciding why they want to leave their current employment. I think that's a big question for me. Our industry is so small. And so when you hear people talk about why they're leaving the vet space or that hospital or that organization, there's a way to present a not right cultural fit in a way that doesn't come across as like making that company out to be the bad guy, regardless of what happened to them. So that usually tells me a lot. Also tells me a little bit about their EQ. If they go on a 20-minute rant about how terrible it was and how they hated everything and nothing is their fault, it tends to show me maybe they're not where I need them to be in a leadership role specifically.
Speaking of EQ, Amanda, I ask a question that reveals that, because I think EQ is really important. Like, we're always asking about the skills and the knowledge and the competency, but like that EQ is that missing secret sauce that I feel like we miss all the time to ask and to get an answer. Like, how are you under stress? These things are going to tell us a lot. Empathy is a luxury when you're not under stress. Right? Can you still show it when things are haywire? So, like, I asked a question to understand, and there's really no wrong answer, but it's a very revealing question. I always ask, is it important for you, if you only had to pick one, to be excellent, positive, or sincere? And if they say excellence, I know that they know how to navigate the positivity, the sincerity. They might not necessarily connect with others or value that collaboration piece, but they're going to be an excellent SME. They're going to be the person that, like, their pride, their reason to show up is caring about their work, and they want to be excellent at their work. If they're positive, I got to make sure that's not toxic positivity. Not everything's going to go right all the time. And if you chose that above sincere, that tells me something too. If you chose that above excellence, that tells me something. If you choose sincere, you probably are underplaying your own value, and you know that you're not perfect, but you're hard on yourself. You're hard on yourself more often than you should be. My job is really just going to be to get out of your way and build you up and turn you into the amazing person that you know that you can be, or help you discover that you know you can be awesome. So it tells me how I would need to lead you, and then allows me to make a decision about my own strengths. Right? Like, I relate to someone who values excellence, I relate to someone who values positivity, and I relate to someone who values sincerity, and all differently. It lets me know kind of how I need to balance out my team as well. So to Amanda's point, those little EQ questions tell you a lot about what the relationship is going to be.
That's brilliant. I'm totally stealing it.
I was going to say the same thing. I am going to steal that one. And, not necessarily along those exact lines, but that emotional intelligence I feel is an extremely important one. And the one that I tend to use that's very revealing in our space is, tell me about a time when you disagreed with an outcome or a project, but you still had to support the implementation. And it's all about that attitude and how you approach the negativity or positivity out of a situation sometimes. And it just tells me so much around the attitude someone is going to have, especially when they don't disagree with something.
Yeah, that's great. Good. Good answers, you guys. All right. Well, I will propose a question. Now, not so much a rapid fire fun one, but you guys can dig into it as much as you'd like. What is one leadership behavior that organizations consistently underestimate, but it has the biggest impact on culture, in your opinion?
I think integrity. Integrity, by definition, is doing the right thing when no one is looking. Integrity is telling the truth at all times, even if it's difficult to hear. Integrity is a huge one where in management is having a difficult conversation with somebody and being truthful with them. A lot of people shut down. If you're truthful and consistent, that is when you get a good work environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Panel, any thoughts?
I think a big one is acknowledgement. Leaders sometimes think in terms of praise, and I'm only going to give the feedback in a performance review or in some type of one on one. But I just think that some people just genuinely need to be seen. And it's one of those things where you can't put it on a dashboard, you can't measure it, and sometimes it's overlooked for that reason. When you're really wanting to build engagement in your organization or those cultural elements, I mean, you can do all the best of those things, but when someone just doesn't feel seen or heard, it's all for naught. I think there was an example of a CEO of, I believe it's one of the big fashion houses, who knows the names of every one of her employees, which is like, wow, that's quite amazing to have that type of connection to your workforce. But it means something to her, and it probably means something to her people that support the business. And it's a little thing, but if you're senior leader and you don't know people 2 or 3 levels below you, that probably is one of those things that is very, very easy to underestimate, but it does have a really big impact, just being seen and know who I am.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think the capability to build a relationship is just something that is often overlooked in leadership, right? Like, they might be the best, the big idea guy, right? And so, like, they're the entrepreneurial spirit. And so that always drives, or if they, from an HR perspective or finance, it can be driven that way. And they can be the best at that. But I think what gets lost in that is that it's the people that work for us that are driving our business day to day. And so we have to be able to take care of them and take the time to know who they are. And that is what I think people follow leaders, right? That's what they always say. People don't leave bad business, they leave bad leaders. That's always something that has stuck with me. And I think when I am meeting a new team, it's one of the things I want to make sure I know, right? Like I do know all of their names. Oftentimes I know what their favorite reality TV show is. It's just a small thing. But to your point, for the leader of that fashion house to know the names of all of her employees, I absolutely think she'll have people who work for her for the next 60 years just because she knows them. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you think about what Sandra just shared, what Amanda just shared, when you look at someone who has the emotional mental bandwidth to remember that sheer amount of people, to give to that amount of people. And a lot of times what happens with leaders is we're the first to fall on the sword. We're focused on everyone but ourselves, and there's not any left over for ourselves. That type of thing eventually leads to burnout. And so having that mental health, having that space, it shapes the culture when you don't think it does, because you think what you're doing is you're sacrificing you, you're contributing to the culture. But I will tell you, like, even with my own team, when I realized my personal growth was interconnected with my business growth, I started investing and growing a lot faster. Even when I was frustrated and thought maybe I was doing things wrong or I should be working even harder, and I realized I shouldn't be amplifying my voice, back to what Sandra was saying. I need to be helping my team find their voice. So what does it mean when I don't hold the reins and get scared because I'm used to always solving anything because of my own past mental things? I think I'm saving you, but I'm actually stunting your growth. So the more I evolve my own mental health, the better everything around me gets. And so advocating that leaders, they don't think that they're impacting culture because they think that they can smile. And then I've put on this great thing for you and you don't know that I'm actually stressed. But eventually you have to consider that you also don't deserve to be corroded, and you deserve to build yourself up and stay strong, and you deserve to be in it for the long haul as well. And even if they might not be able to detect that, there's a settled kind of way that your team has your back and they feel that they're in a trusted ecosystem, even if they can't explain it, because you're investing in your own mental health.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
describe it as
Well,
respect. Respect is big. What I hear from everyone is just respect, not only for, your teams, but yourself, right? And that reflection, like as people are watching and they role model you, that is a transfer of respect to one another. Yeah.
yeah. No, that's almost exactly what I was going to
I
say.
knew it. I knew it. I really.
You saw it on my face. Now, yeah, you model for your employees, you model for those around you. And part of that is, I don't want to say boundaries. I think that's always misused, but that I have time that's precious to me, not only for my personal, but also for the other work that I'm doing. I'm not always just supervising you, John. Have brought up, and to show that it inspires in me as the employee who's are like, okay, I've got to respect my supervisor's time. It means that I'll be more prepared. Generally, just promotes a level of professionalism because we're all respecting each other's times. And then, I think it helps shape you as an employee.
Yeah.
One thing that I want to bounce off of, one thing that I do add is a really simple thing is I do a walkthrough every day and I say good morning to everybody. It's a very helpful tool. What that does is it gets a temperature check with all your staff members. If you say good morning to one of your staff members and you see that the morale is down in that one person, let's check in with that person. Let's see what's going on with them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a super simple tool.
Okay. I'm going to throw out another question to you guys. That was really good dialogue. I appreciate it. What is one mistake organizations make when trying to scale quickly? So I think all of you have been part of high growth organizations at one point or another in your career history. From your perspectives, if you had to name one critical error, what is that?
Okay, so I'll jump in and say a little bit here because it's so funny. I think Dr. Maxwell said the answer in our first fun question.
The fun question.
In an organization, and for those of you who don't know me, most of my background is change management and organizational psychology and how these two things interplay. So a lot of times you have growth and you have infrastructure, and that is where I want to go and what I'm doing to maintain my day to day. And if you were trying to grow and outpace growth and you were not thinking about infrastructure, eventually infrastructure is not strong enough to maintain the growth. It's like you have a little tiny two-seater car and then you want to put that engine into a Ford F-150. It's not going to work, right? So a lot of times I think we say do more with less, do more with less as a way to respond to the organization feeling the strain that their infrastructure is not supporting the pace of their growth. And so what we'll say is, no, we're going lean. The other thing I was going to say, and I was like, oh,
Oh,
don't say
the
it, is agile. We're gonna be agile. We're gonna go lean, and like all those phrases that really just mean do more with less. And it's fine in that like initial rub stage, but eventually you're going to have to ask your teams what they need. You're going to have to resource. And the really smart leader is looking at what investment on the front end they're going to make in their infrastructure when they start that growth journey so that it's not a surprise cost and it's not an inconvenience in their minds to invest in infrastructure and make sure the teams have what they need. So I would say that's the biggest thing for me is understanding what infrastructure impact is going to happen when you grow.
I definitely appreciate what Evie's saying, and I was thinking something almost quite the opposite because I'm thinking like, hey, the infrastructure, that's great, but what about those cultural elements? Because I think you can build the org chart in like 90 days, whatever time frame, but I think is you can't build the trust of those cultural elements in those 90 days. So I think everyone should have an understanding, as Evie mentioned, of the plan. What is that plan for growth? How are we going to fund this? But at the same time, has anyone even asked the people impacted, whether it's sometimes they're being outsourced in these acquisitions or in these growth phases, or everybody is talking about AI right now and the role that it plays in the world of work right now. And does everybody believe the same thing so that we can work on this better together? And I think the ones that go really well when you're thinking about growth is that when companies do slow down just a little bit to be thoughtful, it's definitely the structural part, but it's also the other elements that are going to be impacted, which typically are dealing with your people. So, it's really like a balance, I think, of that infrastructure and introducing the right values along with that velocity or that speed of change.
Yeah, and I think there is also a point at which you're moving too quickly, and I know that that's probably sacrilege to say, but it feels oftentimes like companies, they get this it's almost like they can't stop. They become addicted, and they're just like, "If we just buy 3 or 4 more, we'll acquire these smaller companies, and we'll just go without thinking through it." And I'm here on the legal side, so I'll say that's where you're gonna get lawsuits just sprouting up because, "Oh, we'll just cut this person over there, it's duplicative," or "We'll do this," and without any thought, without any care, without any understanding of the culture that you're acquiring and bringing it on. To me, that is the biggest mistake. Just doing it to add on the numbers, to add on the size, so you look good in front of your investors instead of actually thinking, "How do we stitch this in?" Right? And there is a point, obviously, change is always going to hurt, right? There's no gentle way to do it, but to understand that there is a point where you're going too quickly. And not only are you going to spend a bunch of money on something that ultimately is going to be a dead limb, you're going to have to hack off, not to be too violent in my imagery, but it's true. If you go too quickly, then you're just blowing money on something that's going to rot on the vine.
I saw in the chat, Amanda, what was Missy saying? Remembered?
Remember,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, and that's something, obviously in Business Basics 101, right? We talk about the core values, the mission, vision, the goals, and the milestones. And I know a lot of times for younger, more novice businesses, it's kind of like, well, why? Who cares? Why do we have to focus on this? And that's part of the foundation. That's part of helping you remain true to who you say you are, as well as that reminder of what was the goal day one. And yes, that can evolve and morph, and you should reevaluate those goals and, the vision and mission. But I think there's a strategic way of doing it versus like shotgun style, whatever sticks, and that's where we're going. And I see the panelists nodding. I think for a lot of us, again, somehow we've been involved with what felt like pure chaos. And it felt like, does anybody even have the roadmap anymore? Right? Because are we even on the road? Like, it doesn't feel like it. It feels kind of rocky.
A quick war story is where we met, in the acquisition of a lot of these practices. But these are specialty practices. These are practices that had been operating for 30 years under the same set of rules. And there was this delicate process. And then they would screw it up right at the last minute because somebody would miscommunicate. And then all of this months of effort just breaks right at the end because they just wanted to sign the paper and just want to move on. And again, that was an isolated example that I'm thinking of, but it shows you how quickly that you can screw things up by just rushing. And I get that it's hard, right? It's hard to sustain that sort of thoughtful, a proactive kind of mind. You just want to be like, I'm done, and whew. But in change management and that kind of significant change to an organization, there is never any few moments, right? There's no, we're safe now. It's always sort of reinforcing.
When you're looking at scaling that quickly, oftentimes it's forgotten about the impacts to the current team, right? Like the current hospitals or companies or businesses that you own. In my previous lives, we were scaling so fast. As the higher up as a leader I got, the less ability I had to build a relationship with those second and third levels below me, because it was a phone call in the morning that I would spend my whole day investigating, right? Whether it was, I mean, we can talk about some of them now probably, but like poop on a windshield because they were mad someone took a parking spot, or, you have like significant others showing up at work making big deals. But I felt like I was always putting out a fire instead of really being able to remind our teams of why do we do what we do. I'm a vet tech because I love this industry and I love the animals that I'm treating and the client animal bond. That's what I'm here for, but I can't even deal with that because we're scaling so fast. I'm just barely keeping my head above water. And who suffers is the hospitals you have pre-existing, right? Or the companies you have pre-existing. They just get lost in that. And then you start to get the disengagement and the culture and all the other things start to fall apart.
For that, there's nothing like growth to reveal to a leader what their balance of ambition and mindfulness is. If they are more ambitious than they are mindful, you're about to outgrow your infrastructure. If you are more mindful, but you don't really have ambition there, you're going to lock in on an infrastructure like Nokia. You're going to lock in on an infrastructure and then you'll be outpaced by the market. And so like the macro is the micro and vice versa. So for me, when I'm hearing all these leaders talk right now, I'm hearing mindfulness. I'm thinking infrastructure. That is, what are we doing right now? And how much of it have we just been kind of skipping through the lilies because the impact is low, but then we blow this out and it's not organized enough. It's not streamlined enough. People have been using Excel sheets to do some of this stuff. People have been doing some of the stuff by sending a fax and printing manually. And we cannot sustain. We can't just ask them to double, triple their capabilities. We can't just magically grow like Alistair was talking about, expanding and ballooning and adding all these people in and then just streamlining it back down. How much bending can we do before the organization breaks under the weight of that ambition? And it really connects to how can you balance your mindfulness as you are being ambitious?
I want to throw a new question out to the panelists about burnout. What are some subtle signs that burnout is becoming normalized within workplace culture?
For me, it's when folks start calling off, right? There's a pattern to it. In those moments, that's where I gently engage the conversation of how are you? Let's take a pause. Even with the conversation about growth, can we pause? Let's look at what we're going through individually as a team. Are we in a good place? So, yeah, paying attention to how people are experiencing change or just the environment that they're in the workplace.
Yeah, and I would add that if every conversation you have with somebody else in your organization, no matter if they be subordinate, you're lateral or above, there's a shortness to it. Or if it's like, let's get through this. So there's always a sort of sense of how do we don't add something to my to-do list, right? It's not about problem solving. It has then become entirely about how do I keep my head just above water. I think that I don't know how to describe it other than vibes, right? But I think if you see that and encounter with a lot of people who are basically like, all right, let's just check it, let's get it on, and it's not for efficiency, that you're probably pushed beyond the limit of the safety, and that's not sustainable. Every organization goes through periods where it's like, look, we just got to crunch. And if you're a good leader, then you can say, look, we got to do 6 weeks and it's be really hard. but things are going to flatten out. Again, going back to integrity and everything that we mentioned at the very beginning, that's an important one not to lie about. But if at any point it's just been a slow boil, I think the best way to tell is if everybody is just sort of short, trying to knock things off their list. They're just trying to get done. That's not the vibe you want, I think, with leaders. You want them to be, oh, there's a new problem that we can fix for the company to make it better. Yay. Maybe not yay, but
I think you tend to see a slide back in performance, even at all levels, right? I think to Alistair's point, just in general, client service will start to decline. You'll see more mistakes. You'll see less of that investment into the work that they're doing day to day. They're coming, they're collecting a check, and they're going home, and they forget, to Missy's point earlier, the why. What are you here for? And that's often when I have to take a step back and figure out how many people is it in the practice, right? Or wherever I'm working. Is it all of them? And this is a symptom of a larger problem, or is it one? And I think we as leaders can't be afraid to ask the questions. I think, Dr. Maxwell, to your point, you have to check in with them and say, what's going on, but also be okay with, is this season of your life over? Is this not the place, the purpose, the work for you anymore? And help them find that. I think people really have a reluctance to change. They get in a situation and they feel stuck and they forget that they have a choice to leave, right? Like, everyone has free will, everyone has an opportunity to leave. I've asked the question more than once, do you want to work here? Because I think when you're afraid to pose that, you end up with a lot of employees who are half in, half out. But you're the problem. They're never going to acknowledge their part, that their season is just over. So
I think two things I want to throw in on that, Alistair. One is kind of piggybacking what you said, and I feel like it stops being fun. From a leader perspective, you notice the vibes are off. People aren't laughing or enjoying themselves. And I'm not saying work is there to entertain people, but we would hope passionate people are passionate about what they're doing and they're having fun doing it. And that's usually a sign of a healthy, in our case, clinic or business or what have you. And when the vibe is off and it's like we're just checking the box, clocking in, clocking out. And then the second one I want to throw out there from a leader perspective. So again, recognizing, is burnout becoming normalized in my business, working on PTO, nonstop emails 24/7, which tells me those people are not finding balance anymore. So either the workload has become too much, like something is off, because I need people to unplug, especially if they're taking PTO. And if that's not happening, there is a systemic issue that's occurring. All right, new question. Going back to the fact that we have a panel of people from different backgrounds representing different departments in a business, how do you create buy-in across departments that may have competing priorities or perspectives? So let's talk about, in the business world, how do we get collaboration amongst departments that might otherwise be siloed or have siloed priorities?
For myself, I'm an integrator. So I'll be that butterfly that floats from department to department, weaving all the connections together and then sharing with others. Well, so and so's working on this and working on that, right? Especially if the infrastructure has not created an operations type of role. And I think that's necessary as leaders, or if you identify someone in your organization who has that skill, is to help them do it with intention and bring people together. Meaningful meetings and retreats are also helpful so that people get to know each other on a human level, but also then can talk about the work, right? And see how they can work together to create efficiency or bring a product or a service to fruition.
One of the things that I struggle with in the legal department, right? Because the lawyers, nobody ever wants to be in a meeting. One of the things, well, one of the things that I realize is if I see an opportunity when somebody comes to me with a hot mess, right? Here is an opportunity for me to help you fix this, to make this a workable disaster and maybe even turn it around. That means that I then have exchanged some credibility, right? I've helped you turn this away from complete disaster. Now what you can do is, and this is how I network inside my company, is that I say, all right, next time when you get to this point, if you call me, I could have helped you avoid this, right? And it's not an admonishment. It is, we could do this better next time. So it's an invitation, because at the end of the day, I sit in my office and I sit here and I work and I'm kind of in this corner dark space. I love my office, by the way, but I'm far away from all the drama. So nothing comes into the door casually. But I don't want the things that are coming in to be disasters that I have to clean up. I want them to be proactive, right? But I have to build that. I have to build that credibility. So I think one of the ways that I do that is when they come to me with a disaster, I make myself as accessible, as responsible, and I really try and help them fix the problem to their satisfaction, because the next time they won't come to me with a disaster, they'll come to me with an idea and it'll be integrated through that. And to the point, I can't remember who said it, but it's so true that when you are in a company that is really just burnt out, not only are they just checking boxes, they've stopped engaging, right? They're not as invested in what we're doing. But if everybody's invested, you can work hard. You want them to work hard because you want everybody to want to get it right. And so for me, integrating the legal into that department you have to pay a little bit up front. You have to clean up some messes, but then going forward, you'll have a proactive role, which is the best one.
Yeah. Love what Alistair just said, because in my mind and heart, I'm still thinking about the last question too. And in my mind, I was like, I think my answer to this answers both, because competing priorities are contributors to burnout experiences. And if you don't manage them thoughtfully, it could leave the end user or the person impacted feeling like they're not heard, which would worsen their burnout. Because it's like, what's the point? No one's listening to me. And a lot of times we want to ask them it's wrong, but if they don't feel safe to tell us or they don't feel hurt, we're not going to get the answer. We want to tell them a million different things. But the reality is, in this economy, people don't really have the choice that they used to have to leave their jobs. They got to be there. That is their check. They are not.
Very true.
We all want to be Nepo babies. We're doing this, right? Like, so
Yeah.
like they have to, there's a have to, and in the back of their mind, they're constantly weighing, how much do I push before I put my own self, possibly my role, at risk, at proverbial risk. And so when they're coming to the table, first back question, now to the forward question, when they're coming to the table asserting those priorities, they've weighed that risk. They've weighed the risk of, I'm pushing for something that I know makes me the squeaky wheel. I'm pushing for something I know makes me the inconvenient person, the person that's stepping up and standing out here, but it's important to me. And the way that I kind of try to address that, obviously, there's some high emotionality when people really care about their job, and even more when they care about the impact of their job, when lives are involved, when health is involved, when in certain sectors like that, there's high emotionality there. I always try to approach it from the perspective of, tell me what's the most important priority to you. Let me negotiate your one thing. And that kind of sets the tone that I'm not going to be able to do all 10 of these things that you have shared with me. However, I am going to go to bat for you. So I'm simultaneously and subtly kind of setting the stage that if there are competing priorities, this team is just as important to me as this team. Tell me what your one thing is and tell me what your one thing is. If they don't compete, you both get the one thing. We'll figure the rest out in the wash, right? If those do compete, then we need to dig into that and figure out how. But if I can prioritize and show that I can get motion on your most important thing with an understanding that we can make a 30, 60, 90 for the other things. I mean, all of these are going to have some rub and some inconveniences, but if we have a plan for those and I can attack the most important thing, then that buys bandwidth, helps you stave off your own burnout, because you're like, you know what? It has an expiration date now. So we're going to fix this thing, and these other things have an expiration date. I might be still getting emails on PTO, but it won't be forever. I might still be having these things, but it won't be forever. And that kind of gives them a little bit more reprieve that they can use as an engine to fuel their work while we're navigating that growth and that weird phase where we're figuring everything out.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add, and I think along the same lines as what Evie just mentioned about the competing priorities, get people in the same room with data that they can share so that those competing priorities are no longer those assumptions. So if we're all on the same page about what the data says, it's a much easier place for the conversation to take place when those competing priorities are real to each one of those departments. So there's always some type of tension when there's those competing priorities. And, that's safer than alignment sometimes. And it's so easy for people just to want to win in certain cases by helping them to understand what
is behind the shared or common goal that's going to drive that execution. And I don't think there's an easy way to always get there, but I completely echo what Evie was saying just around eliminating some of those competing priorities and just like, hey, then we can get to what else is important. But let's solve this one thing right now without everyone just really getting worked up over it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Last question. I can't believe we're already coming up on time. This hour has flown by. Let me ask you guys, if every leader listening today could improve one skill immediately that would positively impact their team tomorrow, what would that skill be? And in your opinion, why is that important?
Emotional regulation, EQ, 100%.
Agreed. Well, of course.
Answered for the group. He answered. He said, "Go." Yeah, I agree. I think it's something I feel like is a trendier phase in business now, right? Like we hear about it way more now than when I got into just the workforce. But EQ is such a part of it, and there's so much that you can gain from it. I have a 16-year-old who has a super high EQ for 16, and just the way that he navigates life, his emotional regulation, his ability to be so pragmatic. I just know that I don't ever worry about him being successful because he just has this innate ability to do it. And I love my ability to create relationships and connectivity and be so empathetic. But at some point, I think we all know some of those can also be a detriment in certain capacities because you want to fix everything and you want to make everything better and you want people to do it because it's the right thing. And I just wish I had a little bit of the EQ could hone that a little bit better. So, Alistair, I agree for sure.
I want to. Oh, sorry. Oh, no, we keep doing this.
You two, never again. You two aren't going on a panel again together. Or we'll put you in the same box together.
Exactly. Well, what I was going to say is one of the responsibilities I had now, and I actually had at my last gig, was when a new employee or an employee candidate has something on their background because of a variety of, they're a criminal background check. It comes to me for review and I make a recommendation. Well, the hiring manager is not usually somebody who's going to have any of the information that I do because we keep that very strictly confidential. So from the legal department, I'm saying I recommend you not proceed with this candidate, right? And several times, I would say 15% of the time, I get a kind of an ugly response. I wouldn't say disrespectful, but it's definitely, I need you to justify yourself why you've done this. And I realize that I win so much more credibility and also, for the organization if I don't take that opportunity to snap back and say, I recognize why you're frustrated, right? You put in all this effort to hire somebody, you found somebody, and at the last minute, for reasons you don't have any input in, I'm saying no. And to recognize that and turn that into an opportunity, I think that's something that I guess I'll pat myself on the back. That once I figured out that was an opportunity that I could turn around into something good, I was like, okay, I felt like I had discovered a magic spell. But that's what I'm talking about in terms of emotional regulation. Don't allow yourself to be reactive. Sometimes there's a role for negative emotions, I think, but to do it consciously and strategically, I think, and you're going to have a much easier time. At least that has been my experience.
Yeah. Shandell, take us home.
Mm, mm, mm. No, I 100%, of course. Of course, I want to take it to a whole nother level too. For leaders, EQ is one phase of understanding and practicing and encouraging others to practice and learn. But then diving a little deeper, looking at how are we regulating our emotions? How are you how are you sharing with your employees or other leaders? How is it that you're regulating your nervous system, right? So getting some practices like that, because then you can then help those around you regulate their nervous systems too. I've been in practices and organizations where we do those pause moments and just listen to music. I do sound healing, sound baths. So I'll bring my sound bowls to our meetings to help get everyone on the same wavelength, if you will. But yeah, understanding what impacts nervous systems, how unregulated nervous systems can impact an organization and communication and workflow, and then figuring out a way to strategize around that with the team's leaders involved. I think we got to go to that level of how do we work together as human beings, period.
Two thoughts that come to mind, and we'll take it home from there. One thing that came to mind as you guys were talking, we do this in the hospital setting, but I can't see why it wouldn't work in any business setting for that matter. A lot of times when working with leaders, I stress to them that they set the tone and the pace for the day, for the department, for the outcome, right? And Chandel, to your point, one way to help regulate the team is that team huddle in the morning and kind of lay out what they can expect. Maybe someone called out, we're going to have to push lunches, what have you, but this is what we're going to expect. And as your leader, I'm going to help you navigate that. And I think that's a lot of times what's missing is we have leaders by title, but not by action. And then the team feels like it's pure chaos. And the last point I was going to make, and this is super petty, but something I love to do. I know Amanda perked up. She was like, yes. Something I love to do when somebody is struggling to emotionally regulate is gaslight them. And so I will say, are you okay? And just like let let them just spiral out. On that note, I think we should pull the plug on this one. So thank you, you guys, so much for today. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy work days to join me and to have some really fantastic conversation. I appreciate all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
This was
So-
fun.